Hey there, my friends. Before we dive into today's story, I want to take a moment to talk to you from my heart. What you're about to hear is not just another war story. This is a true account of one of the most selfless acts of courage ever documented in modern military history. It's about a young man, barely out of his teens, who in a split second made a decision that would change his life forever. This is a story about sacrifice, about brotherhood, about what it truly means to put someone else's life before your own. So, please, take a moment, get comfortable, and let me share with you the incredible true story of a hero. This story will be told in third person, allowing us to witness every powerful moment as it unfolded. Let's begin. November 21st, 2010, Marjah District, Helmand Province, Afghanistan. The sun was beginning its descent over the dust-covered landscape, casting long shadows across the compound where Fox Company, 2nd Battalion, 9th Marines had established their position. On the rooftop of a small structure, two young Marines stood watch, their eyes scanning the hostile terrain that surrounded them on all sides. The temperature was dropping as evening approached, but both men remained alert, their rifles ready, their senses sharp. Lance Corporal Kyle Carpenter was 21 years old, a kid from South Carolina, who had joined the Marines with the kind of idealism and patriotism that seems to belong to a different era. Standing beside him was Lance Corporal Nicholas Eufrazio, his brother in arms, his friend, the man he had trained with, fought with, and trusted with his life. They had been deployed to one of the most dangerous regions in Afghanistan, a place where the Taliban moved like shadows and death could come from any direction at any moment. The rooftop position was critical. From their vantage point, they could see the approaches to the compound, could provide early warning if insurgents attempted to attack. But that elevated position also made them vulnerable, exposed, visible targets for anyone who wanted to strike at the Americans who had come to their land. The Marines knew the risks. They accepted them. That's what they had signed up for. Carpenter adjusted his position, his body armor heavy in the heat that still radiated from the rooftop, even as the sun lowered. He and Eufrazio had been talking quietly, the kind of conversation that happens between brothers, about home, about what they would do when they got back to the States, about the lives they had left behind and the lives they hoped to return to. In war, these conversations are sacred. They remind young men that there is a world beyond the violence, beyond the fear, beyond the ever-present possibility of death. The compound had been relatively quiet that day. Patrols had gone out and returned without major incidents. The local population had been cautious but not openly hostile. Intelligence reports suggested Taliban activity in the area, but that was true of almost everywhere in Helmand Province. The Marines remained vigilant, but there was a routine to the watch, a rhythm that came from doing the same thing day after day in a combat zone. What neither Carpenter nor Eufrazio could have known was that enemy fighters had been watching them, studying their patterns, waiting for the right moment to strike. The Taliban were patient. They understood warfare in their own land, in ways that foreign forces often struggled to comprehend. They knew how to move unseen, how to get close, how to exploit any moment of vulnerability. It happened without warning. 1 second, the two Marines were standing on that rooftop, alert but calm. The next second, there was movement in Carpenter's peripheral vision, something small and dark arcing through the air toward them. His mind processed it in a fraction of a heartbeat. Grenade. Enemy grenade. Incoming. The explosive device landed between them with a metallic sound that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet of the evening. Both Marines saw it. Both understood instantly what it meant. In approximately 4 to 5 seconds, that grenade would detonate, sending shrapnel in every direction, shredding flesh, penetrating body armor at close range, killing or catastrophically wounding anyone within its blast radius. 4 to 5 seconds. That's all the time they had. That's all the time anyone has when a grenade lands at their feet. Most people can't even process what's happening in that amount of time. The mind struggles to accept the reality of imminent death. But Marines are trained differently. They are taught to act when others freeze, to make decisions when others panic, to function when the human instinct for self-preservation would normally take over. Kyle Carpenter didn't freeze, he didn't panic. He didn't think about what he was about to do or calculate the odds of survival or consider the alternatives. He simply moved, In that split second, with the grenade sitting there between him and his friend, Carpenter made a choice that defines the very essence of heroism. He moved toward the grenade, not away from it, toward it. He dove onto the explosive device, covering it with his own body, using his flesh and bone as a shield to protect Nicholas Eufrazio from the blast that was about to come. There was no hesitation, no moment of doubt, no calculation of cost. There was only action, only sacrifice, only the purest form of love that one human being can show another, the willingness to die so that they might live. The grenade detonated. The explosion was catastrophic. The force of the blast at point-blank range was devastating beyond description. Carpenter's body absorbed the majority of the shrapnel and concussive force. Metal fragments tore through him, ripping into his face, his skull, his arms, his torso. His right eye was destroyed instantly. His jaw was shattered, teeth blown out, facial bones fractured in multiple places. His right arm was mangled almost beyond recognition. Shrapnel penetrated his skull, his brain, his internal organs. The blast threw both Marines from the rooftop. Eufrazio, protected by Carpenter's sacrifice, suffered serious injuries, but survived the initial explosion. Carpenter should have died instantly. Every medical assessment, every statistical analysis of blast injuries, every piece of combat casualty data suggested that what he had just done was fatal. No one survives taking a grenade blast to the body at point-blank range. It simply doesn't happen. But Kyle Carpenter didn't know that he was supposed to die. And somehow, impossibly, his heart kept beating. The response from the other Marines in the compound was immediate. They had heard the explosion, had seen the blast, had rushed to the rooftop to find both men down. What they saw when they reached Carpenter was horrific. He was barely recognizable as human. His face was destroyed, his body torn apart, blood everywhere. The corpsman who reached him first later said he didn't think there was any point in treating him because he believed Carpenter was already dead or would be within seconds. But they tried anyway. That's what Marines do. They never give up on their brothers. The corpsman began emergency treatment even as he called for urgent casualty evacuation. Carpenter's breathing was labored, irregular. His pulse was weak and thready. He was going into shock, bleeding out, dying right there on that rooftop in Afghanistan. "Stay with me, Carpenter," the corpsman said, working frantically to stabilize him. "Stay with me, brother. We're getting you out of here." The medevac helicopter arrived with the kind of speed that only happens in combat when lives are on the line. Carpenter was loaded aboard, the flight medics taking over his care, pushing fluids, controlling bleeding, doing everything possible to keep him alive for the flight to the field hospital. The pilots pushed the helicopter to its limits, racing against time and against the injuries that were killing their passenger. At the field hospital, the medical team was waiting. They had been alerted that a critically wounded Marine was incoming, but nothing could have fully prepared them for what they saw when Carpenter arrived. One surgeon later described his injuries as among the worst he had seen in multiple combat deployments. The damage was so extensive that the immediate question wasn't how to fix him, but whether it was even possible to save his life. They operated for hours, fighting to stabilize him, to stop the bleeding, to address the most life-threatening injuries. His skull was fractured, brain swelling, facial structure destroyed, right arm barely attached, internal injuries throughout his torso. The surgeons worked with the kind of desperate intensity that comes from knowing that the man on the table had given everything to save his friend. Carpenter was evacuated from Afghanistan to Germany, then to the United States to the National Naval Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. He remained unconscious, in critical condition, his survival uncertain with each passing day. His parents were notified, told to prepare for the worst. They flew to be with their son, to sit beside his bed, to pray and hope, and refused to accept that this was the end of his story. The doctors at Bethesda were among the best combat trauma specialists in the world. They had seen thousands of wounded warriors from Iraq and Afghanistan. They had performed miracles of modern medicine, saving lives that would have been lost in any previous war. But even they were doubtful about Carpenter's chances. The injuries were simply too severe, too extensive, too devastating. But Kyle Carpenter had already done the impossible once. He had survived a grenade blast that should have killed him instantly. And now, day by day, surgery by surgery, he began to do the impossible again. He began to survive. He woke up 5 weeks after the explosion. When he finally regained consciousness, he couldn't speak because his jaw was wired shut. He couldn't see out of his right eye because it no longer existed. His right arm was a mangled mess that would require dozens of surgeries to even partially restore. His face was so damaged that he was barely recognizable. But he was alive. Against all odds, against all medical probability, Kyle Carpenter was alive. The road to recovery was brutal. Over the next 2.5 years, Carpenter would undergo more than 40 surgeries. Reconstructive surgery on his face, surgery on his arm, surgery to address the brain injury, surgery to remove shrapnel that remained embedded throughout his body. Each operation was agonizing, each recovery period a test of will and endurance that would have broken most people. But Carpenter never gave up. He pushed through the pain, through the setbacks, through the moments of despair when the extent of what he had lost became clear. He learned to function without his right eye. He worked tirelessly in physical therapy to restore some use to his mangled right arm. He underwent dental reconstruction, facial reconstruction, procedures that slowly, piece by piece, gave him back a face that he could live with, even if it would never be the same face he had before November 21st, 2010. Throughout his recovery, Carpenter maintained the same spirit that had driven him to throw himself on that grenade. He didn't see himself as a hero. He didn't want praise or recognition. He had done what any Marine would do for a brother, he insisted. He had simply reacted in the moment, done what his training and his heart had told him was right. But the Marine Corps and the nation saw something different. They saw an act of valor so extraordinary, so selfless, so pure in its courage, that it represented the very highest ideals of military service. An investigation was launched into the events of that day. Testimony gathered from witnesses, medical records reviewed, the circumstances examined in minute detail. On June 19, 2014, nearly 4 years after that terrible day in Marjah, Lance Corporal Kyle Carpenter stood in the East Room of the White House. He was wearing his dress uniform, standing tall despite everything he had been through. His scarred face proud, his rebuilt body strong. President Barack Obama stood before him, holding the Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration that the United States can bestow. Kyle Carpenter threw himself in front of a grenade to save the life of a fellow Marine, the president said during the ceremony. His is the valor that defines our Marine Corps. His is the valor that defines our nation. The medal was placed around Carpenter's neck. At age 24, he became the youngest living Medal of Honor recipient, joining an elite group of fewer than 80 living recipients of the nation's highest award for valor in combat. The ceremony was attended by his family, his fellow Marines, military leadership, and government officials. But the person Carpenter looked for in that room, the person whose presence meant the most, was Nicholas Eufrazio, the man whose life he had saved. Eufrazio had recovered from his injuries, had continued his service, had lived because Kyle Carpenter had been willing to die. The two men embraced after the ceremony, and no words were necessary. The bond between them was beyond language, forged in combat, sealed by sacrifice. After receiving the Medal of Honor, Carpenter could have rested on his laurels, could have lived quietly, could have faded from public view. Instead, he chose to use his platform to help others. He enrolled at the University of South Carolina, pursuing a degree in international studies. He became a motivational speaker, sharing his story with schools, military units, veteran organizations, anyone who would listen. His message was simple but powerful. Never give up. Serve something larger than yourself. Live with purpose and gratitude. He wrote a book titled, "You Are Worth It: Building a Life Worth Fighting For," published in 2019. In it, he detailed not just the events of that day in Afghanistan, but the entire journey of recovery, the struggles with pain and depression, the moments of doubt, and ultimately the decision to live fully despite what he had lost. The book became a bestseller, touching millions with its message of resilience and hope. Carpenter also became an advocate for wounded veterans, working with organizations that support those who have been injured in service to their nation. He understood their struggles because he had lived them, understood their pain because he carried it every day, understood their need for purpose because he had fought to find his own. The physical scars remained. His face bore the permanent marks of that explosion, a visible reminder of what he had given. His right arm, though functional after dozens of surgeries, would never be the same. His vision was limited to one eye. He dealt with chronic pain, with the effects of traumatic brain injury, with the psychological weight of what he had experienced. But he refused to let those things define him. "I didn't survive to just exist," he said in an interview years after the incident. "I survived to live, to make a difference, to show people that no matter what you've been through, no matter what you've lost, you can still build something beautiful with your life." Nicholas Eufrazio went on to complete his service and transition to civilian life. He has maintained a lower profile than Carpenter, preferring privacy, but he has never forgotten what his brother did for him that day. In the years since, he has spoken occasionally about the incident, always with emotion, always with profound gratitude for the gift of life that Kyle Carpenter gave him. The compound in Marjah, where it happened, no longer houses American forces. The war in Afghanistan has ended, the troops withdrawn, the mission concluded. But the rooftop where two young Marines stood watch on November 21, 2010, remains a sacred place in Marine Corps history, a location where the highest ideals of military service were demonstrated in the purest possible way. Carpenter's story has been studied at military academies, used as a case study in courses on leadership and ethics, cited as an example of the warrior spirit that defines the Marine Corps. Young recruits at Paris Island and Camp Pendleton learn about what he did, are inspired by his sacrifice, are challenged to consider whether they would have the courage to do the same thing if faced with that terrible choice. But for Kyle Carpenter himself, the focus has always been forward, not backward. He has worked to build a life worth living, to honor the sacrifice he made by making the most of every day he has been given. He has traveled the world, met presidents and celebrities, been interviewed by major media outlets, received countless awards and honors, but he remains fundamentally the same person he was before that grenade landed at his feet. A man of deep conviction, strong character, and unwavering commitment to his brothers in arms. The medical professionals who treated him still marvel at his survival. By every statistical measure, every medical assessment, every combat casualty analysis, Kyle Carpenter should not be alive. The injuries he sustained were simply too severe, the damage too extensive. But somehow, through a combination of exceptional medical care, physical resilience, mental toughness, and perhaps something beyond medical science, faith, destiny, divine intervention, call it what you will, he survived. Today, Kyle Carpenter lives in South Carolina, not far from where he grew up. He has a foundation that supports wounded veterans and their families. He continues to speak publicly, to share his message of resilience and purpose. He works out regularly, maintaining the physical fitness that defines the Marine identity, despite his injuries. He enjoys life, finds joy in simple things, treasures his relationships with family and friends. He has said that he doesn't remember the actual moment of the explosion, doesn't recall the decision to jump on the grenade. His last clear memory is of seeing it land, and then there is nothing until he woke up weeks later in the hospital. But he has never questioned what he did, never regretted the choice his instincts made in that split second. When asked if he would do it again, knowing the cost, knowing what he would have to endure, his answer is immediate and unequivocal. Yes, absolutely, without hesitation. "That's what Marines do," he says simply. "We take care of each other. We don't leave our brothers behind, and we don't let them die if we can prevent it. I did what any Marine would do." But not every Marine would do what Kyle Carpenter did. Not every Marine could do it. What he did requires more than training, more than duty, more than courage. It requires a fundamental understanding that some things are worth dying for, that brotherhood is real. That love, the kind of love that has nothing to do with romance and everything to do with sacrifice, is the most powerful force in human existence. The grenade that landed on that rooftop in Afghanistan was meant to kill. It was designed for maximum lethality, maximum damage, maximum carnage. The Taliban fighter who threw it intended for both Marines to die, But instead, through Kyle Carpenter's instantaneous act of selflessness, one life was saved, and another, though shattered and broken, was preserved. In the years since that day, both Carpenter and Eufrazio have built lives worth living. They have loved, laughed, succeeded, struggled, and persevered. They have both become husbands, brothers, sons, friends, contributing members of society. All of that exists because in one terrible moment, one young man chose to give everything so that another might live. That is the legacy of November 21st, 2010. That is the story of Kyle Carpenter. That is what the Medal of Honor represents. Not just courage in combat, but the highest form of human love, the willingness to lay down one's life for another. Now, my friends, let me share with you why this story matters so much, why it's important that we remember and honor what Kyle Carpenter did. In a world that often seems divided, where people struggle to find common purpose or shared values, stories like this remind us of what truly matters. They show us that heroism isn't about being the strongest or the toughest. It's about being willing to put someone else first, to sacrifice yourself for the good of another. This is a lesson that transcends military service. It applies to all of us, in our daily lives, in our relationships, in how we treat each other. Kyle Carpenter's story has been documented extensively. The official Medal of Honor citation, recorded by the United States Marine Corps in 2014, details the events of November 21, 2010, in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. His recovery has been chronicled by the National Naval Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland, and Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. The Washington Post, the New York Times, and numerous military publications have covered his journey from that terrible day through his remarkable recovery. His book, You Are Worth It, published in 2019, provides his own first-hand account. These sources, along with interviews conducted over the years from 2010 through 2024, confirm the extraordinary nature of his sacrifice and survival. What Kyle did reminds us that in our darkest moments, in our most difficult hours, we have the capacity for incredible courage and selflessness. His story challenges each of us to consider what we would do, how we would act, what we would be willing to sacrifice for those we love. So my friends, thank you so much for watching this video today. Thank you for taking the time to hear Kyle Carpenter's story, to honor his sacrifice, to remember what he represents. I would love to know, where are you watching this video from? What state or city are you in right now? Please drop a comment below and let me know. I read every single comment and I love hearing from all of you around the world. If this story moved you, if it inspired you, if it made you think about courage and sacrifice in a new way, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. These stories matter. These heroes deserve to be remembered. From my heart to yours, thank you for being part of this community. Thank you for caring about these stories of courage and sacrifice. Sending you a big hug and all my gratitude. Until next time, my friends, take care of yourselves and each other. Remember, you are worth fighting for. God bless you all, and God bless heroes like Kyle Carpenter, who remind us what it means to be truly human.